Welcome back to Keep Buggering On. And fair warning, everything that you are about to hear is true, and none of it is going to make you feel any better about humanity. December 1904, Diamond Shoals off Cape Hatteras, a steamship called the Northeastern is coming apart in a storm so bad it takes the rescue crew a full day just to get a boat through the surf.
And here's the line everybody quotes about that night. The line that basically becomes the entire personality of the United States Coast Guard for the next 100 years.
Except, depending which version you read, the man in charge said, "The blue says we've got to go out, and it doesn't say a damn thing about having to come back."
Or, the regulations do not say anything about coming back. They say go.
Or, a completely different retelling, somebody yells, "You'll never get back," and he just says, "Go."
3 versions, 1 guy, 0 people who wrote any of it down that night. It happened.
Which means the Coast Guard's most famous line of all time might not even be real, and they know it. Their own historian says so, in writing on their website.
Huzzah for institutional honesty, I guess.
Listen, are you ready for this? Because it's a gem. The man at the center of this is Patrick Etheridge, born 1851, Outer Banks, North Carolina. He starts as a surfman. Yes, that's literally the job title, at the Cape Hatteras life-saving station in 1882.
Quick clarifier before we go any further, so nobody gets lost. The life-saving service isn't the Coast Guard yet. It doesn't become the Coast Guard until 1915, when it merges with the Revenue Cutter Service. Everything with Etheridge happens before that. He's not Coast Guard. He's the reason there eventually is one.
Right? He becomes keeper in 1891, transfers to New Inlet Station in 1909, Bodie Island in 1914, and retires in 1915. The same year, the Coast Guard is officially born after 33 years of service.
So he's not around for the part where his own quote becomes legend.
He is not. Now, the policy. In 1899, the Life-Saving Service rewrites its regulations. Section 252 says a keeper will not desist from his efforts until by actual trial the impossibility of effecting a rescue is demonstrated. Translation: it was too rough, doesn't count as a reason to stop, unless you can prove you tried and it failed.
You don't get to have an opinion about the weather. You get to have a documented attempt.
Exactly. Now, here's the legend as most people have heard it. For decades, everyone assumed Etheridge said his famous line during an 1885 rescue, the wreck of the barkentine Ephraim Williams, which actually earned him and his crew the gold life-saving medal.
Great story, one problem.
One massive problem. The 1885 rescue happened before the 1899 regulation existed. So the quote, which is specifically about the blue, the regulation book, can't be about a rule that hadn't been written yet.
The math doesn't work. The legend attached itself to the wrong shipwreck.
Right? So historians now think it's actually the 1904 Northeastern wreck we opened with. And here's the kicker. The station logbook for that rescue is incredibly detailed. Boat launches, wave conditions, timing, every technical detail of an oar-powered wooden surf boat getting hurled back onto the beach over and over across a full day.
But not one word of dialogue.
Not one. The earliest surviving account of the quote is a newspaper story from 1946, 42 years after the fact. Then a 1954 letter to Coast Guard magazine from a retired chief boatswain's mate who actually served with Etheridge. Two sources, decades apart, two different wordings, and neither person was standing there with a notepad in the storm.
So the greatest closing line in Coast Guard history is a 50-year game of telephone that somebody finally decided to write down.
And it's probably still close to true. The Coast Guard's own historian thinks Etheridge said something along those lines. They just can't nail down the exact words, which makes this one of those rare cases where the myth is doing honest work. It's standing in for something real that nobody managed to capture in the moment. It actually mattered.
The man did the thing, we just can't prove exactly what he said while he was doing it.
He and his crew got through. That part isn't disputed. Everybody survived the Northeastern rescue, passengers included.
Okay, can we sit with the actual company policy for a second? Because I've read a lot of workplace regulations across 30 years in the construction industry, and Section 252 is unhinged.
Okay, go.
Will not desist from his efforts until by actual trial the impossibility of effecting a rescue is demonstrated. Read that like an HR document. That's not a safety policy. That's a policy with a safety clause surgically removed. You are required to attempt the task, and the only acceptable proof that it's impossible is that you already tried it and it hurt you.
Oh, no off-ramp built in anywhere.
Zero off-ramp. And this isn't a one-time thing that got quietly fixed. This exact language, essentially word for word, gets carried into Coast Guard manuals through 1916, 17, 21, 22, 34. And it's still functionally intact as late as 1949. That's 50 years of an organization writing the same clause. Your judgment about your own danger does not count as evidence.
Geez, from a modern QC standpoint, how does that even function as policy?
It doesn't long term. That's the whole point. Every safety culture I've been a part of for 3 decades exists specifically because somebody eventually had to write the opposite clause. Stop work authority. The idea that I believe this is too dangerous is itself valid data, not something you have to prove with your body first. The Coast Guard didn't have that clause for over a century.
They had to prove it's impossible by trying. Nobody had to prove it's dangerous by feeling.
Right? And I want to be careful here because this isn't a villain story. It's an institution built entirely around a heroic ideal, writing policy in the exact language of that ideal, and not noticing for 100 years that the ideal doubled as a liability. That's not malice. That's just what happens when a mission statement gets promoted to regulation without anybody revisiting it.
Which is basically every workplace culture problem that's ever existed, just with better weather.
Worse weather, actually, but same shape.
Which is where it gets genuinely interesting, because they did eventually notice. In March 2018, the Coast Guard formally retired the Go Anyway standard. Commandant's Instruction C1-3500.3A replaces it with an actual risk assessment framework. They literally call it green, amber, red, where crews now weigh the value of the rescue against the danger to themselves before they launch.
114 years, roughly, between your risk doesn't count and your risk counts.
And it wasn't a rebrand. The historical record includes real losses of Coast Guard rescuers over the decades under the old standard. That's what actually moves an institution this size. Not a sudden ethical insight, a cost nobody could keep explaining away.
Systems don't update because they get wiser. They update because the bill finally comes due, and somebody with authority has to sign for it.
And notice, they didn't retire the myth. They kept "you have to go out" as the emotional core of the service. They just built a filter in front of it so it stops being a literal instruction and goes back to being what it always should have been, a story about who they are, not a rule that gets people killed.
Which honestly might be the healthiest way an organization can hold on to a legend. Proud of the story, done using it as a policy.
Which is exactly why "you have to go out, you don't have to come back" is going on a shirt.
Not because it's cute, because it might be the most honest sentence a workplace ever accidentally put into writing, even though we can't prove exactly who said it first or how.
KBO looked at that and just thought, true and worth wearing. Wear the mindset soon. We're in the final product cataloging stages. Huzzah! KBO, standardsupply.com.
Every keeper on that beach checked the sky before a launch. Read the wind, read the swell, read what the day was about to do to them.
And the regulation had already answered the question before they even finished looking.
Sometimes checking the sky isn't about getting new information. It's about looking anyway, because somebody already handed you the answer, and you're just stalling for a second to feel like it was your choice.
Etheridge checked, and then he went anyway. We checked it. It's real. You are not going to believe it. Until next time, take care of yourself, my friend.